The Abyssinian Crisis was a key event during Mussolini's rule and Italian expansion. It had tremendous consequences for the League of Nations, Abyssinia, Italy, Great Britain, France, Germany, and even Central and Eastern Europe. The crisis itself developed out of Mussolini's desire to have an empire at just about any cost. This is a speech by Benito Mussolini given on October 2nd, 1933, regarding the planned invasion of Abyssinia. He said the following: "It is not only an army marching towards its goal, but it is 44 million Italians marching in unity behind this army. Because the blackest of injustices is being attempted against them, that of taking from them their place in the sun. When in 1915 Italy threw in her fate with that of the Allies, how many cries of admiration, how many promises were heard. But after the common victory, which cost Italy 600,000 dead, 400,000 lost, and 1 million wounded, when peace was being discussed around the table, only the crumbs of a rich colonial booty were left for us to pick up. For 13 years we have been patient while the circle tightened around us at the hands of those who would wish to suffocate us." Mussolini wanted to create an empire in order to make Italy a great power, like France and Great Britain were perceived to be. There were economic reasons why empire was needed as well, but Mussolini did not emphasize these in his public statements. While Italy held Libya, Eritrea, and part of Somalia, these territories were experiencing severe poverty. So when reviewing the world map for suitable territory to conquer in nearby Africa, there remained only Abyssinia and Liberia. Liberia was a state formed by freed slaves in the 19th century and under the indirect supervision and sponsorship of the United States. Abyssinia was conveniently located beside the Italian colonies of Somaliland and Eritrea, and its borders were loosely defined, if at all. Mussolini was completely uninterested in the economic potential and also disregarded the state of the Italian economy, which was totally unprepared to finance a war for any reason. In December 1934, a clash occurred between Italian and Abyssinian troops at the small oasis of Wal-Wal on the Abyssinian side of the border with Italian Somaliland, leaving at least 2 Italian soldiers and over 100 Abyssinian troops dead. Italy demanded $100,000 in an official apology from the Abyssinian government. Abyssinia responded by appealing to the League of Nations, of which both Italy and Abyssinia were members. An arbitration committee was established and announced in September 1935 that the Wal-Wal Incident, as it became known, was minor and that neither country was at fault. Mussolini, however, had already directed the Italian army in December of 1934 to prepare for the invasion of Abyssinia. Armies also prepared to invade from neighboring Italian colonies. Great Britain and France were very aware of Italy's plans, but were unwilling to jeopardize their relationship with Italy, which they believed was important for opposing German foreign policies. October 1935 saw the long-expected invasion of Abyssinia. This invasion was quick and decisive. The relatively modern Italian forces annihilated the Abyssinian army sent against them that used a variety of antique weapons. Aerial bombing by the Italians and the liberal use of poison gas over large areas led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of men, women, children, and livestock, poisoning water and destroying crops. The Emperor of Abyssinia escaped to Britain while practically all organized Opposition to the Italian armies collapsed in the midst of the destruction in early 1936. Italian Somaliland, Eritrea, and Abyssinia were then merged into one large colony, Italian East Africa. The arrogance. The capital of this new colony was Addis Ababa, Abyssinia's capital city, and the King of Italy was retitled as Emperor of Ethiopia. Over 750 people were killed in Abyssinia during the war. Inhabitants and livestock of whole villages were completely destroyed. Suffering in Abyssinia continued after the war officially was declared over. Guerrilla attacks on Italian forces were relatively minor, but continued throughout Italy's occupation of Abyssinia. There were no large-scale revolts, probably because of the lack of weapons and organization, but also because of the sheer violence of the Italian military's response. Mussolini ordered that prisoners be shot, that various villages be gassed where resistance had been discovered, and the priests and others suspected of complicity in armed resistance to be executed without hesitation. So, as one can see, there was a lot of cruelty in this campaign. Some apologetic historians like to go back and say, you know, Mussolini was not as bad as Hitler. Yeah, he was a fascist, but he didn't do the Holocaust. But in reality, he did. He did order the mass deaths and genocide of so many people. And the telegrams he sent during this crisis just prove and serve as evidence. Mussolini sent telegrams to his army commanders in Ethiopia in 1936. And, you know, one of them is labeled secret. And this was sent on June 1936. And it says, to finish off rebels, as in the case of Al-Kabor, use gas, Mussolini. He literally signed Mussolini. The next one is July 1936. I repeat my authorization to initiate and systematically conduct a policy of terror and extermination against rebels and populations in complicity with them. Without the law of 10 eyes for one, we cannot heal this wound in good time. Mussolini. And then he sent another one in February 1937 that says, agree that male population of Goetti over 18 years of age is to be shot and village destroyed. Mussolini. In October 1935, the League, led by Great Britain and France, condemned the Italian invasion of Abyssinia, voting for a gradually escalating program of economic sanctions. Other than ignoring the issue outright, this was the least the League could do. The League placed no embargo on oil exports to Italy, which would have brought the Italian economy to a halt and quickly. Backed by public opinion and a weak national government, Britain did not threaten Italy with war or even consider it an option, so a divided French government did not either. Britain refused to close the Suez Canal to Italian shipping on the grounds that this might lead to a war in the Mediterranean. The lack of an oil embargo and the use of the Suez Canal condemned Abyssinia to defeat, and this was accomplished by May 1936. When the Emperor of Abyssinia, Haile Selassie, was allowed to speak to the League of Nations in the same month, Italy withdrew from the League in protest, much as Japan had done earlier. This is an excerpt from a speech by Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia to the League of Nations on June 30th, 1936. He was called the Lion of Judah. Anyways, he said this: the Ethiopian government never expected other governments to shed their soldiers' blood to defend the covenant when their own immediate personal interests were not at stake. Ethiopian warriors asked only for means to defend themselves. On many occasions, I have asked for financial assistance for the purchase of arms. That assistance has been constantly refused me. What then, in practice, is the meaning of Article 16 and of collective security? Should it happen that a strong government finds it may, with impunity, destroy a weak people, then the hour strikes for that weak people to appeal to the League of Nations to give its judgment in all freedom. God and history will remember your judgment. The Abyssinian Crisis revealed the League of Nations to be simply an extension of the foreign ministries of Great Britain and France. Collective security at the core of the League of Nations covenant failed in an effort by the governments of Great Britain and France to keep Italy as an ally against Germany while satisfying the demands of its citizens. Italy was actually driven closer to Germany by the League's actions. After the blatant failure of the League to address the destruction of a member state, it ceased to be an influential body. The crisis demonstrated that Britain and France would jettison key section of the League's covenant at will for their own interest, despite pledging to do otherwise. This meant that the League of Nations not only was unimportant, but in terms of international security, now had little reason to exist. This is an excerpt from The Origins of the Second World War by A.G.P. Taylor. He wrote this: on the 1st of May, the Emperor Selassie left Abyssinia. A week later, Mussolini proclaimed the foundation of a new Roman Empire. This was a death blow to the League as well as to Abyssinia. 52 nations had combined to resist aggression. All they accomplished was that Selassie lost all of his country instead of only half. Incorrigible in impracticality, the League further offended Italy by allowing Selassie a hearing at the Assembly, and then expelled him for the crime of taking the covenant seriously. Japan and Germany had already left the League. Italy followed in December 1937. The League continued in existence only by averting its eyes from what was happening around it. Mussolini was convinced that neither Britain nor France would raise serious objections to the invasion, and therefore the League of Nations, which they essentially controlled, would not interfere. In fact, in January 1935, Laval, the French foreign minister, had verbally promised Mussolini that France would not interfere with Italy's actions in Abyssinia. France's main concern was Germany. Britain's Foreign Office was desperate to avert the crisis either by offering Mussolini land elsewhere or by helping to negotiate an agreement which would give Italy effective control of Abyssinia without formally annexing it. Why, then, could such a compromise not be negotiated? It was the scale and brutality of the Italian invasion which confronted both the British and French governments with a considerable dilemma. The British government faced an election in November 1935 and was under intense pressure from the electorate to support the League of Nations and its policies. In an unofficial ballot the year before, 10 million out of 11 million votes backed the use of economic sanctions as opposed to military intervention in a case of aggression. In France, public opinion was more divided, with socialists supporting the League and conservatives supporting Italy. France believed that it needed Italy to help guarantee the borders of its central and eastern allies in the Little Entente against Germany, which Britain refused to do. Germany had recently announced rearmament and had the Saar region returned to it through a plebiscite vote. These, coupled with Germany's rapidly expanding economy, reinforced British and French views that Germany, not remote Eastern Africa, needed their attention. Britain and France, in addition to all the other pressures, did not want to militarily threaten Italy, as this could lead to a war which they could not afford to fight. Again, in the midst of the Great Depression, no country wanted to have to rearm, much less rearm to defend a land far from home. As Mussolini was anti-communist, many people, especially in France, believed that Italy should be given free rein in Ethiopia, if not outright support, so that a united front could face a potentially aggressive Soviet Union in the future. In December 1935, when Abyssinia was all but defeated, Laval and the British Foreign Minister, Samuel Hoare, produced a plan known as the Hoare-Laval Plan. This called for placing 2/3 of Abyssinia under Italy's control and giving what was left to an independent Abyssinia. The smaller state was a narrow strip of land referred to as a corridor to the sea. This land corridor would allow Abyssinia a seaport to build trade and a better economy for its people. There was a strong possibility that this plan would have been acceptable to Mussolini, but it was leaked to the French press. An explosion of outrage among the British public forced their foreign minister's resignation. The plan was dropped. The Times, a major British newspaper, ridiculed the idea of the corridor as a corridor of camels. The sheer violence and aggression against Abyssinia, not to mention war being built on the flimsy excuse of the Wal-Wal Incident, meant that a compromise sought by various governments was destroyed by public opinion, bent on not rewarding war and not wanting to be drawn into one. No one bothered to ask Abyssinian's government for its opinion on this plan. Here is another excerpt from F.S. Northedge, and he wrote this: "The fact is that the British and French governments never had any intention of using force against Italy to stop its advance in Abyssinia, or even of closing the Suez Canal, which would have locked Italian forces in East Africa in a trap. Nor had any other country, though all were ready to cheer Britain and France from the sidelines, had they gone into action, wanted to go to war either. Laval even regarded an oil embargo as a form of military sanction, since he considered that it would have military consequences, and he opposed it for that reason. It was equally evident that, for his part, Mussolini did not intend to be prevented from conquering his victim by anything short of a superior force. The conquest of Abyssinia was too important in his foreign policy. He had invested too much money, too much of his own political future in it. In these circumstances, what course remained for the chief of the League powers except to try to reach a compromise settlement which might at least keep some part of Abyssinia outside the new Roman Empire? The brutality and cynicism, the blatant deception of the Hoare-Laval proposals might need be deplored, but their logic was less easily condemned. The USA worked diplomatically to encourage Mussolini not to invade Abyssinia, obviously with no results. When the invasion began, the U.S. government blocked the sale of weapons, ammunition, and other war supplies to both Italy and Abyssinia through its neutrality acts. This only affected Abyssinia, as Italy produced much of its own war material. Once Abyssinia was absorbed into the Italian Empire, the USA refused to recognize this annexation, in line with the Stimson Doctrine invoked against Japan. The Soviet Union in 1935 was in the midst of continuing economic reconstruction and social upheaval. With mass industrialization and struggles to produce enough food the Soviets were in no condition to exercise an aggressive foreign policy. Nevertheless, the Soviets issued a series of declarations that the independence of Abyssinia must be guaranteed by the League of Nations. When the issue of Abyssinia was debated in the Assembly's halls, the Soviets argued with Italian representatives, condemning their statements regarding Abyssinia in the strongest of terms. Unable to effect the League's failure to impose collective security, the Soviets participated in economic sanctions against Italy, imposing an embargo on all trade, unlike Great Britain and France. Italy was affected by the Abyssinian Crisis in many ways. Economically, Italy was further isolated from markets, and the relative wealth of Western Europe and its trade with the United States was restricted. This certainly affected the economy, which was already weak. This encouraged Italy to continue expanding its economic ties with Central and Southeastern Europe, giving it more independence in its foreign policy. Economic sanctions simply pushed Italy further from cooperative diplomatic relations. Italy was diplomatically isolated by its annexation of Abyssinia. It refused to participate in the London Naval Treaty Conference that began in December 1935, although it had been a part of that group that had initially met in 1922. While this was partly a protest over economic sanctions by Britain and France, it was also because Italy wanted to build a larger fleet that could challenge France in the Mediterranean, and perhaps even Britain eventually. As relations with Germany improved, Italy began to envision the possibility of Italy and Germany cooperating to create a joint navy capable of challenging Britain and France as well. The Stresa front collapsed completely. Italy left the League of Nations in May of 1936, freeing it for other actions, much as Japan had done in 1933. Italy and Germany's new relationship was formalized in October 1936. Italy and Germany's new relationship again was formalized in October 1936 with an agreement commonly known as the Rome-Berlin Axis. This was a treaty of friendship between Germany and Italy, signaling an end to diplomatic cooperation between Italy and Britain and France. This essentially outlined their mutual foreign policies and spheres of interest. Mussolini stated that he did not oppose German annexation of Austria, a key issue for Germany's Hitler. Germany's economy was far greater than that of Italy, and with Germany's economic and military expansion in the late 1930s, Italy was soon reduced to a junior partner in their relationship. This meant that Germany, not Italy, determined the course of their mutual foreign policies, and that in time, Italy's opinions were of little importance to Hitler and the German government. Mussolini made a speech in Milan, Italy in November 1936, where he said this: "The Berlin conversations have resulted in an understanding between our two countries over certain problems which have been particularly acute. By these understandings, this Berlin-Rome line is an axis around which can revolve all these European states with a will to collaboration and peace." In the end, Mussolini's going to use fascist foreign policy ideology to build an empire. Then the effects of the Great Depression allow him to do that. Italy invades Abyssinia. Abyssinia appeals to the League. The League ignores them. Britain and France wanted to keep Italy as an ally, so they ignore it. They proposed a plan, but the plan was too late, and the British people were so outraged that the plan was dropped. Italy is going to be ferociously condemned by the Soviet Union, but the U.S. is going to refuse to even recognize Italy's claim to Abyssinia, but neither were prepared to act. Germany and Italy, as a result of this, formed closer relations. And lastly, agreed to the Rome-Berlin Axis of 1939.